more excited than an annoying dog with a stick, since, you know, there's no one in the game who does anything close to speaking in hands, and in a game already full of hidden secrets and vague clues, this appeared to be another big one. So they started digging. What they found were 4 gray NPCs, labeled in the game files as Monster Kid Goner and 3 G followers, or Gaster followers, with dialogue that provides us the only solid information that we have about this missing character. Through their text, we learned that Dr. W.D. Gaster was the royal scientist before Alphys, was responsible for building the core, i.e. the structure that provides magical power to the underground, and that he disappeared after falling into his creation, getting himself scattered across time and space. Although he may not be physically present, he's supposedly always around, since these guys are all super reluctant to discuss him openly. And beyond that, mostly everything else is speculation. There are these mystery man images in the game data that many speculate might be him, but flip this character upside down. Here, you don't have to imagine it, we can do it through the power of editing. And boom! This could also be him. See the face? Just like so many other things in this game, appearances may be deceiving. There's also this wispy white thing that could also be him according to online theories, but again, it's all just speculation. Game speculation.
Did you know you can call AI now?
Call it and talk to it?
You can call it and talk to it, and it's free.
So I can ask it anything and have a real conversation with it like a real person?
Yeah, at one point you might even forget that you're talking to AI, because it literally sounds like a real person. I didn't feel like getting sucked into another TV show, so I thought I'd call one of my favorite characters and character AI. I'm trying to step up my summer wardrobe. Can you roast my outfit?
You should ditch the black shirt. Definitely choose something other than gray pants. Those are...
So where does all this speculation end up and the theorizing begin? Well, theories are hypotheses supported by evidence, so let's start gathering evidence. Now, whether or not the gray NPCs show up is based on a weird stat programmed into the code called the fun value. Basically, whenever you start a new game, Undertale picks a random number between 1 and 100. Depending on what number you get, different things happen in the game to keep things spicy. It also keeps things really similar to FNAF when you come to think about it. Seriously, are we sure that these two fan bases really hate each other? Because no joke, between wacky animal hijinks, hidden plot mysteries, random Easter eggs, and large quantities of murdered children, the two franchises are a lot more similar than I think people will admit. Anyway, these gray NPCs show up when the fun value is at 61, 62, 63, or higher than 90. And even if the number is there, they only have a 20% chance of showing up per game, which is why your chances of ever even seeing them is so low. Even creepier, if you have a fun value of 66, this eerie gray door appears in Waterfall. When you walk through it, there's a chance that the mystery man appears. Touch him, and poof, he pieces out faster than a babysitter's boyfriend when the parents come home. And the fun value dictates more than just Gaster encounters in secret rooms. When you played Undertale, did you get a call from Sans about your refrigerator running? Or maybe someone called you with the wrong number and then you got a really random song out of it? Or Alfie's called to order some pizza? Well, all of those situations were dictated by your fun value. So why spend all this time talking about fun? Well, because it's the start of the mystery. If there's one thing we know, it's that in the world of Undertale, game mechanics aren't just game mechanics. Toby Fox makes it clear throughout the game that game mechanics make up the very fabric of the game's reality. These aren't just artificial, invisible layers on top of the story for players to use while interacting with the game. These rules, from saving to loading and everything in between, all encompass the actual physical laws of Undertale's universe, much like quantum mechanics and general relativity define ours. Character stats like LVLs or levels of violence, and EXP or execution points in any other game would be numbers relevant only to the player. But in Undertale, they're real, tangible values that characters, most notably Sans, can sense and judge. So if fun is what dictates the appearance or non-appearance of a bunch of these characters connected to Gaster, well, then it behooves us to figure out what fun actually is in the context of the game. And if you're under the mistaken impression that fun is a sense of belief that often comes with playing a game, then you are wrong. You're just wrong. The fun value in Undertale is the embodiment of a very real theory from quantum mechanics known as the many worlds interpretation. It's a favorite of mine here on Game Theory, applicable to everything from the Zelda timeline to the Pokemon universe, so since we've covered it a few times, I'm not going to go in depth here. Click the eye icon in the upper right hand corner to check out those videos where I spend a bit more time explaining it. Long story short, many world interpretation involves the measurement of photons and wave-particle duality, but in a nutshell, imagine you're starting a new game of Undertale. You have the option of either going true pacifist or genocide. Now, in that moment, according to the laws of quantum mechanics, it doesn't matter which you choose. If you choose a pacifist run, there's an alternate reality where you went full-on homicidal maniac, and vice versa. All possible realities simultaneously exist. Each time you're presented with an option to either kill or show mercy to a new character, two new timelines are created, one for each option. And this is where we get back to Gaster and his followers. You see, if you find him, Goner Kid speaks the following line. Have you ever thought about a world where everything is exactly the same, except people exist? Well, in my first playthrough of the game, that's exactly what happened. A world where he didn't exist. In fact, I must have gotten a really lame fun value since I didn't find anyone mentioning Gaster. No secret rooms, no one even wanted to call me. Truly, I was forever alone. But there are realities where he does exist, and where Sans does pick up the phone to call you. In short, think of each new fun value as another world in the many worlds interpretation, another timeline, parallel realities where one small detail is different. Goner Kid does or does not exist. Elfie's does or does not order pizza. So the next time someone tells you to go outside and have some fun, all you really gotta do is create an alternate reality in your own backyard. Simple as that. But not only does this fun value make repeated playthroughs of the game interesting, but it makes a world, pun intended, of difference when it comes to Gaster's storyline. From speaking to the Gaster followers, we know that an experiment went wrong and Gaster was shattered across time and space. Those are some pretty specific words. First, shattered, as in pieces of him went in many different directions. There are multiple pieces of Gaster that now exist. And then there are the operative words of time and space, meaning that these pieces ended up across many different timelines, the many different worlds, each represented by a different fun value. But what other characters do we know are able to retain memories across multiple different timelines? Only two, Flowey and Sans. Flowey tells us at the end of the genocide run that he's lived hundreds, if not thousands of timelines, doing everything under the sun from being nice to people to torturing them. And in the true pacifist run, Asriel, Flowey's true identity, makes mention of being able to destroy this timeline once and for all. Asriel even says the following lines: every time you die, your friends forgive you a little more. Your life will end here in a world where no one remembers you. It's a really specific thing for Asriel to know, that killing something over and over again will cause the memories of it to fade in everyone's mind. In fact, we may even know someone who he's done this to. Goner Kid, Asriel's speech during the final battle is a direct parallel to the same lines we just saw Goner Kid speak a few minutes ago. A world where he no longer exists. The thought terrifies him. Almost as though Asriel did this to him to the point where he does no longer exist. Sans, on the other hand, isn't as powerful as Flowey from a time manipulation perspective, but he does bend the laws of space around him, phasing through walls, and during his battle continually teleports over and over and over again. Though he doesn't show the same or reload like Flowey does, he openly acknowledges that there are other Sanses out there in other realities and tells you to say hello to them. He has tests in place to see if someone is a time traveler, and even though he can't outright control time, he has at least some deeper understanding of timelines being manipulated, as evidenced by his various dialogue with him when you fight him over and over during the final genocide battle, sensing how many times he's beaten you. So is it any wonder that the two characters who together manipulate time and space both wield weapons that look like this, and that, at least for Sans, this weapon, according to the sprite files, happens to be called a Gaster Blaster. Or that for Flowey, this is the weapon that he specifically calls out will destroy the timeline. In fact, as you can imagine, there's a lot more to say about the Sans-Flowey-Gaster connection. But before we do, let's quickly recap. Gaster, the man who speaks in hands and the royal scientist before Alphys, is an entity only known about through his 4 followers, ones that only appear in certain timelines of the game. These timelines are ultimately dictated by a random fun value. With him being shattered across time and space, he must share some connection with the other 2 characters that seemingly straddle time and space, Flowey and Sans, and indeed he does in the form of his Gaster Blasters. But there's more. So much more. From the determination experiments to information found in the True Lab, to Toby Fox's Twitter, to the pivotal clue that makes sense of all of this, the word search. No joke. But that's for next time, when we hop into deep lore talk, neuroscientific analysis, and much more to finally reveal the truth behind W.D. Gaster. So make sure you ring the subscription bell for the notification of when that video is coming out by clicking right here, and you'll be the first to see it. Just about 10 days from now, if you're watching this the day it's uploaded, so it's not that long. You know it's coming. It's not like Doctor Who Part 3, which is existing in this nebulous, non-existent world. There's a final date to this one. And hey, you know what? There's even going to be a For Honor game theory that's sandwiched in next week to keep you even more entertained, because that's a cool game. It's a fun theory that talks about Vikings, samurai, and knights, so that's pretty cool. Look, no one likes a two-parter, least of all me, since it gets everyone to complain about it, but hey, I'm looking out for you guys. But you gotta look out for me, too. Because you know what? That extra time is going to make the final theory that much better. Alright? So in the meantime, remember, that's just a theory. A game theory. Thank
Getting this education, getting my master's, put me on a level that
I have
more respect in the community.
I have that.
Myself with that level of respect
Definitely
and
have
to
that.
say I deserve to be in the room. Start your comeback today at PurdueGlobal.edu.
Let's talk Cash App. Want to move money instantly with a few quick taps? Send cash or Bitcoin fast and free. You can do it with Cash App because Cash App lets you do more with your money.
What if a pirate say the first time he serves spaghetti to Frisk? Bon appetits! Speaking of puns, why does Sans love puns so much? Oh, I know. It must be because he finds them humorous. No need to show me the door. I'll see myself out there.
Yeah.
Hello, Internet. Welcome to Game Theory, where don't worry, I'm not going to stay on camera nearly as long this episode. I just wanted to pop on real quick and say thank you. Thank you for the incredible support that you guys gave me during the last episode. Part 1 of this Undertale series was incredibly intimidating to put up because it was so personal, and it had me unloading so much emotional baggage that I've been carrying around for almost a year. The outpouring of support that came in the aftermath of that video, in the comments, on social media, on Twitter, it was overwhelming. So thank you guys. Thank you so much for being there for the last 6 years and for being there on a video that I was really nervous about. Even more than that, the people I want to thank the most are the haters on those original videos who went into the comments and on Twitter and apologized for some of the comments that they made. I know that we live in a day and age where people are afraid to be wrong. And so to actually go out and say that you were sorry for comments that you made was incredibly brave. Thank you for that. And thank you for being an inspiration to the internet as a whole. We could all use a little bit more of that. So anyway, just wanted to say thank you a whole bunch. This is a really long episode with a lot of information, so I'm going to get off camera now and go back to voiceover land. Gotta hop back in the closet. So thank you, and enjoy Undertale Part 2.
So, what's the verdict? Gorgeous.
You're looking incredible in that dress. This whole outfit makes you look like an angel sent from heaven. You always look pretty, but you've really outdone yourself this time.
Yeah? Cool, what's that? That was much higher praise than expected.
I'm going to die of embarrassment. Why? Girls do this for each other all the time.
Oh, young love. It's so sweet. He said I was pretty. He said I was pretty. I concede. I didn't think he had it in him to compliment a girl right. He's done well. Almost like he's used to this stuff. Maybe he's into that sort of tomboy aesthetic.
You've done a 180 into looking cool as hell. I always thought your vibe skewed more hot than cute, so I'd say this is a great fit.
I'm going.
Oh, thanks. That's sweet.
Oh.
But anyway, moving on.
Wow, you can't pull the cute. Who's that pushing bombshell? Love it. You're so pretty.
What to do next? What to do next? This one might be a little too revealing. Of course, I doubt too revealing would be a problem for him. How do you like me? Oh, Elisa, how bold.
I'll say.
What'd she just say?
She wants to disappear.
Fan service too much for her?
Stop it. Let's talk Gaster, the missing royal scientist who created the core, fell into its creation, and was shattered across time and space. Last time we learned about the Gaster followers, fun values, the idea of parallel timelines, the space and time manipulation of Flowey and Sans, and the connection to their weapons, the Gaster Blaster for Sans, and the Hyper Goner Timeline Destroyer for Flowey. Also, real quick, I didn't bring it up last time, but Hyper Goner? It's a weird name for that weapon, right? Weirder still, though, is that it shares its name with Goner Kid, one of those monsters who's always associated with Gaster. Coincidence? Maybe, but I think it really supports the idea that Goner Kid, like Gaster, is someone who has been wiped clean from across the timelines. But that was all last time. Having now laid the groundwork for this entire theory, it's time to get into the nitty-gritty, with some details that I guarantee that you haven't heard anywhere else, and that I also guarantee will blow your mind about this game. But to begin, we have to start with perhaps the darkest area in all of Undertale, the True Lab. It's an area of the game that you can only access if you're doing a true pacifist playthrough, and inside are some of the darkest secrets from the entire game. According to the entries found in the computer screens throughout the lab, Alphys, the royal scientist after Gaster, experimented with injecting determination, defined as the will to keep living and the resolve to change fate, into comatose monster bodies in an attempt to create souls strong enough to break the barrier keeping the monsters trapped in the underground. Of course, it turns out that the soul itself has to already be strong, and since all the souls of all the monsters in the underground added together don't even amount to the strength of one human soul, the results of these experiments are downright terrifying. Instead of creating stronger monster souls, these experiments yielded horrific monsters melted together, fused bodies that turned into shambling creatures called amalgamates. And if that wasn't bad enough, during these experiments, Alphys not only injected monsters with determination, but also injected a tiny yellow flower. Wonder if that was a good idea. And thus, the main antagonist of the entire freaking game was born. GG Science, GG. Now, most of you watching probably already know that story. You're actually expected to piece it together bit by bit from numbered lab entries scattered throughout that area. But one thing that usually escapes players will notice that one number is missing. Entry 17. Is this just an error by Toby Fox? Did you lose count, buddy? 14, 15, 16, 18, 19, 20? What you say? Nope. If you edit the game files manually and set your location to room number 264, an otherwise inaccessible room in the game, you find contained inside entry 17. And what it says is bone-chilling. Unlike all the others, this entry is written in the font of Wingdings. And if you translate those random symbols into English, it says the following. Quote, entry number 17. Dark, darker, yet darker. The darkness keeps growing. The shadows cutting deeper. Photon readings negative. This next experiment seems very, very interesting. What do you two think? What we have just read is Gaster's final letter. But how do we know? Well, the entry is written in the font Wingdings. Definitely not one you see people dipping into all that often. And at this point, it's widely accepted that the WD in WD Gaster's name is meant to stand for the font Wingdings, just like Sans is Comic Sans and Papyrus is Papyrus. This explanation would also account for the whole man who speaks in hands bit from the boat keeper. Wingdings is the only font ridiculous enough to have actual hands as letters, but more on that one later. What I want to note first is that this entry reveals what happened to Gaster. Based on the Gaster follower dialogue we covered last time, we know that he fell into, quote, his creation. But it's not specified that his creation is necessarily the core. In fact, I would hazard to say that it's not. What entry 17 tells us is that Gaster, not Alphys, created the determination extractor and then tested it on himself. Now, don't get me wrong, what we actually see in-game was the result of Alphys' work, but she based a lot of her research on the work of Gaster. How do we know? Well, Alphys mentions blueprints in lab entry 5, but she does so in a way that doesn't lead me to believe that she actually created those blueprints. The exact entry reads, "I've done it. Using the blueprints, I've extracted it from the human souls. I believe this is what gives their souls the strength to persist after death. Determination." Look at the phrasing here. She didn't say her blueprints worked. She didn't say her device or her research, just the blueprints, which implies to me that they were just laying around. And indeed they were. You can actually find them in a secret lab behind Sans and Papyrus's house. There, on the table, blueprints for a mysterious machine, written in symbols. Symbols or wingdings, perhaps. Not only this, but look at the device she ends up building from these blueprints. The determination extractor looks a whole lot like an animal skull. The same skull-like shape of the Gaster Blaster and the Hyper Goner, Gaster's signature shape. But lastly on this topic, just look at the Mystery Man sprite. The design is droopy, slightly melted, just like the other monsters Alphys infused with determination. He amalgamates. And just like Undyne before her death, melts because she's too determined for her own good. Determination melts monsters. Thus, the melted sprite of Mystery Man seems to imply that Gaster himself fused his body with excessive amounts of determination. Let's hop back to entry 17. Look at the language here. The darkness keeps growing. The shadows cutting deeper. Cutting. This reads not like a room that's slowly losing light, but rather like a man who's being broken apart, losing control of himself and his identity. And as we discussed last time, Gaster's followers confirmed that he was indeed shattered across time and space in the aftermath of his experiment. So now that we have a fairly strong suspicion about what happened to him, is that it? Where is he now? Have we solved the mystery of WD Gaster? No, not yet, because I'm about to convince you that WD Gaster is Sans. Mind blown? Well, get ready because I'm not done. WD Gaster is also Papyrus. My theory is that in being shattered, half the created and fused into Sans, and the other half into Papyrus. Now, I already know that you're going to start drawing parallels to the over-the-top claim that Sans is Ness. And yeah, I am saying that Sans is Gaster, so start the memes, go ahead, go for it. But keep an open mind, because I have a ton of evidence supporting this idea. And I'm going to hit you with one hard piece of evidence right off the bat, since I know winning you over on this topic is going to be enough to battle. So obviously Sans and Papyrus are named after fonts, and as we already discussed, it seems like Gaster is the same, being named after wingdings. Plus, all three are skeletons, so already there's some weird connection there. But let's look again at Gaster's name. It's WD Gaster. Wingding, sure, but what's this Aster part all about? Well, Aster is a font with serifs. You know, those little hooks on the ends of letters to make them more readable? It's a font that, well, not exactly, closely resembles the font of Sans's V's when he falls asleep during his genocide battle. And that, in and of itself, is a bizarre choice for a character who does everything else in a non-serif font of Comic Sans. So WD Gaster, a skeleton-looking character with a name made up of two fonts, has pieces of him divided up into the two other skeletons who each have a single font name, and one just so happens to have text that closely resembles an Aster font. It's a lot of weird coincidences to account for. And if you think the idea of one creature creating two others is far-fetched, then look no further than the amalgamates. One creature made from multiple others. others glued together by determination experiments. Or take, for instance, Shyren. On the official Tumblr of Undertale, Toby found his lead character as Sans immediately after making a clear reference to Gaster, mentioning someone who's listening suggests doing research about Shyren. So I did, and found a fact that most other players don't know about. The head and body of the sprite that you fight in the game are actually two different beings, but an optical illusion makes them look like they're one single creature. It's odd, isn't it, that Toby would call attention to this unless Gaster himself was some sort of illusion. One character slipped the other. So let's continue, since this is a pretty massive claim, and I still don't expect you to be convinced yet. When asked about Papyrus and Sans, the snowed-in shopkeeper explains that the Skelebros just showed up one day and asserted themselves. It's a weird origin story. They're not like the other monsters. They're different in some way. Well, that being the result of a failed experiment would explain why they just showed up one day. They literally popped into existence out of a different timeline. Need proof? Happy to provide. Look no further than the fact that Sans' song on his date and in his lab is named It's Raining Somewhere Else. That somewhere else is a different timeline, as it parallels the line Connor Kid himself says, quote, an umbrella, but it's not raining. Yeah, it's raining somewhere else. A kid from a lost timeline randomly talking about the rain? I don't think that's just a random coincidence. It's Toby's way of showing this kid and the Gaster followers from these various timelines are all connected to the Skelebros. It would also explain Sans' strange hatred for humans. For a guy who seems so laid back about so many things, during your date with him, he gets deadly serious. He outright admits that if he hadn't made a promise to Toriel to protect your character, quote, you'd be dead where you stand. Sure, he plays it off as a joke afterward, but just don't joke about stuff like that. And we all know Sans' no-eye pose is his serious face. But why would Sans care about a human walking around? He doesn't really seem to care about anything else except for Papyrus. Well, if he truly is a part of Gaster, who shattered while trying to replicate the powers of human determination, then that's a pretty solid reason to hate mankind. He's got a vendetta, a grudge. Sans also has a direct connection with the Royal Scientist's lab. In a patch that came after the game's release, if the player calls Papyrus twice on the top floor of the lab, he'll say that the bag of dog food in that room looks familiar, that Sans had it in his room for a while. We also see in some versions of the True Pacifist ending that, in a surprise to all the characters, Alphys and Sans know each other. When Papyrus calls out this out-of-nowhere revelation, Alphys starts to get super nervous, until Sans deflects the question and everyone moves on. It's almost like you know they're hiding something. But here's the clincher. A detail that, to my knowledge, no one has picked up yet. We've all assumed that all the lab entries, except for the one in Wingdings, were written by Alphys as she conducts her determination experiments. But the truth is, they're not. There's another author for about half of them, and that author is Sans. Pay close attention to the text of the entries. Half are grammatically correct, with proper punctuation and capitalization. The other half are entirely in lowercase. Who else in the game not only speaks in lowercase, but according to the note in his room, is also confirmed to write in lowercase? Sans. It all seems to indicate that the "what do you two think" at the end of Gaster's entry number 17 refers not to Sans and Papyrus, but rather to Sans and Alphys, who are staying silent about what happened to Gaster that day. And all of this isn't even mentioning Sans' lines about wanting to go home or go back. He says as much during his dinner date scene at the Metaton Hotel. He notices that the player must want to go home and says, buddy, I know the feeling. And in the genocide run during his boss fight, he says, look, I gave up trying to go back a long time ago. So where does he want to go back to? The surface? That's not it. In his very next line of dialogue, he says, and getting to the surface doesn't really appeal to me anymore either. Keyword there being either. He wants to go back home, but to him, home isn't a place. It's a time, a different timeline, a different state of being. It just couldn't. The thing he's trying to fix is Gaster. Perhaps Sans is the easy one to convince you of. He has weird space-bending powers and knowledge of other timelines. His room is filled with metaphysical things, and he's the one with the key to the secret workshop. He openly acknowledges timelines and research about anomalies in the time-space continuum and breaks the fourth wall. But Papyrus, he exhibits none of that. How could he, the great Papyrus, be wrapped up in all of this? And why would I possibly say something as ballsy and specific and as extreme as their two halves of the same brain? That is me making a huge final claim for this theory. Well, that's for the final episode on this topic where we tie up all the lingering mysteries of Undertale. I've already crammed a ton of stuff into this episode to make it into a manageable length, and I don't want to rush through some of these awesome final revelations, so next time we tackle the lies of Papyrus, the neuroscience of Undertale, and how it all serves as our biggest clue to who these characters really are. But in the meantime, theorists, remember, that's just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching. Seriously though, I'm sorry that this turned into a 3-part. It was meant purely to stop at 2, but as I kept digging and writing, I kept finding more and more that I had to cover. Contrary to what many people have said, Toby Fox did a ton of clues about this hidden storyline throughout the game, so I want to be as thorough as possible in covering it all, to do it the justice that it deserves. So don't worry, there won't be much waiting for this one. It's coming up next week. If you're interested in making sure that it hits your subscription box immediately as it comes out, make sure you ring that subscription bell by showing mercy to the annotation right here. Just like Solomon Ismailov did, join the notification squad, got the first comment on the first part of the Gaster video, and is now here and getting his name probably butchered by me in this voiceover. Congratulations, sir. Click here to watch where we play on the live stream Undertale fan hacks, specifically battles against Gaster. The gameplay of these things are incredible. It forces you to put to the test every single element of gameplay from Undertale proper in this ultimate boss battle. It is phenomenal. One of the best games that we've played on the live streams as a whole, and it's a fan game. Check out that video, check out that fan game, definitely worth your time. Now if you'll excuse me, Gaster 3 calls as well as a Fallout video. Time to do something new around these parts, yeah? So I'll see you then. Have a great week.
I got the Honey Nut Cheerio choo-choo train.
Alright you guys, let's do an everything shower. Today I'm using all native products, their volumizing shampoo, body wash, face cleanser, and even their body lotion. I always start with native shampoo because it's thoughtfully made with clean ingredients, which is very important to me. The Cashmere and Rain body wash smells amazing, and it'll leave your skin feeling soft and hydrated without leaving a residue. I also love how gentle the facial cleanser is, finishing off with Native's body lotion because it leaves my skin feeling moisturized all day, and then just ending with some makeup and blow drying my hair, and I'm ready for the day. Bye guys.
Let's cut to the chase. Deltarune is the prequel to Undertale, just not the way you think it is. Internet, welcome to Game Theory, where if Sans is Nest, then you know Lancer is gonna be Lucas. I mean, the hair is a perfect match, and the letters in both names are identical, provided you swap out 2, add 1, and mix them all up. Theory confirmed. And now that we've definitely proven that connection beyond a shadow of a doubt, a few quick announcements. First, Holiday Theory wear is still available, so if you like soft, cozy, oversized things with hoods and in the color black, well, boy howdy, did we create something for you. Hats, coats, sweater dresses, PJ pants, check them out. Link is in the description. And if you order in the next couple weeks, you'll get it in time for Christmas. You know the drill. But don't wait too long because a lot of the items are selling out fast.
Since safety is always peace of mind for us, having Granger as a partner, they make it very easy for us to keep our events safe. Being able to have these supplies that we need readily available makes for a very quick response time.
A .world domain name that welcomes and immerses. Own your world at name.com/weekend.
In other, quite frankly, more important news, you may remember that earlier this year, we lost our longest-running team member, Ronnie, to suicide. In his honor, on Monday, November 26th, we're doing a 6-hour live stream to raise money for the Brain and Behavior Research Fund, which funds scientific research that is actively looking for better treatments and potential cures for mental health issues like depression, anxiety, and bipolar disorder. It is a fantastic cause, and obviously one that hits close to home for the Theorist family, so if you have the time to join us and potentially donate, we would be so incredibly grateful. We have a ton of special guests coming from all different quarters of YouTube to be a part of this thing, so it should be a long day full of a lot of fun, all for a cause that could benefit a lot of theorists out there. So please mark it down in your calendars. November 26th, starting here on the channel at noon Pacific time, running for at least 6 hours, all for an amazing cause. Alright, updates out of the way, let's figure out what's really going on in this game. In case you missed it, Deltarune came out of nowhere. One day, the Undertale Twitter account just started randomly going off about new futures and connections, and then all of a sudden, here's a link to a sketch-tastic website that totally doesn't look like it's a virus waiting to happen. But after malware checking the file twice, you load it up, and lo and behold, it's all our favorite faces from 3 years ago. Alphys, Riel, Asgore, Undyne, all on the surface. It's gotta be a continuation of Undertale, right? Not quite. You see, it quickly becomes apparent there's something more than a sequel here. No one knows each other. Undyne has never heard of Alphys and has both her eyes. Asgore isn't a king, he's the owner of a flower shop. Asriel isn't some twisted demigod out for revenge, but rather your brother who's away at college. And there's no talk of surfaces and underworlds, but rather darkners and lighteners. It's like Undertale, not quite. Everything is just a little mixed up, just like the letters in the name. Deltarune is an anagram of Undertale. In short, it is all the same pieces, they're all rearranged. So what's it all mean? Well, with only Chapter 1 released of a game that, according to Toby Fox, may take up to 999 years to complete, we should probably try to figure out what the complete story of Deltarune is going to be all about, since if we don't solve it now, who knows if any of us will live to the day that it's released. And once we have a grasp on what's really happening in this struggle between lighteners and darkners, how does it connect to Undertale? Does it connect to Undertale at all? So working alongside Reddit user Win on the Game Theorist subreddit, I think the two of us have figured this thing out. Top to bottom, up, down, and sideways. Fun fact, by the way, Win isn't just the fan theorist that I found on the Game Theorist subreddit, he's also the creator of the troll face. So over the last couple weeks, I have been in the presence of OG lore. Pretty fascinating, actually. The internet is a surprisingly small place. Anyway, I digress. Today we start to solve Deltarune with an interpretation that I believe will be pretty controversial. But have no fear, I plan to solve it a second, likely less controversial way in a follow-up theory in just a few days. 2 days, maybe even 3 theories for just this one chapter. Maybe we gotta milk this thing. Like I said, it's gonna take 99 years for it to come out, so we should probably just enjoy theorizing about it now, since it might go away and we'll never see it again. The first thing we need to address is how this game deals with the element of choice, or more accurately, disregards the element of choice. Immediately upon starting up the game, Deltarune catches players off guard by having them create a character, imbue them with seemingly symbolic personality traits, and then immediately throw it all away, saying no one can choose who they are in this world. This theme of non-choice continues everywhere. In the classroom, you can't choose your project partner, you're just assigned the class bully Susie. You can't choose your dialogue options out in the hallway with Susie, with her outright telling you your choices don't matter. Then, once you two enter the dark world, Susie tells you to lead the way, and then immediately takes over. Your choice is you. Later on in Chapter 1, you try to direct Susie in the prison hallways, and she just outright ignores you, even in battles. I mean, sure, there's a violent and non-violent way to end every confrontation in the game, but no one actually dies. They just run away. And sure, the dialogue for the ending changes slightly, but the evil king still survives, and you still get back home to rip out your heart and show off your cutlery. Chris is Yuri confirmed. Now, this all could be the theme of the game, and probably is to a certain extent, that in life you do actually have to sometimes fight battles. I mean, even if you don't fight the king at the end of the chapter, the conversation about having to fight him still happens. But I don't really believe that's the only reason all of this is in there. I think Toby Fox included this theme so strongly in Chapter 1 to set up the audience expectations for what Deltarune is. A normal game. It's a normal game. Remember, Toby Fox is coming off of Undertale, a game that was revolutionary in its gameplay, one that reinvented the way we see RPGs and violence in video games, and one that was built on the principle that every decision would affect the outcome in some way. Any project that Toby did next would have to contend with audience expectation carried over from Undertale. And by telling people out of the gates that, hey, this is a very different gameplay experience than the choice-based systems of Undertale, it helps set audience expectations accordingly. And you don't just have to take my assumption for it on Twit Longer, who did a Q&A with himself where he addressed some of the major questions he predicted people would have about Deltarune. In the typically vague way that game developers talk about their games these days, here's a bunch of quotes from that Q&A. Will there be multiple endings? No. No matter what you do, the ending will be the same. Honestly, most games are like that, but for some reason it feels really impressive to say here. I think that's part of the reason why the act fight system feels so vestigial in this one, but I wanted to do it anyway because it's cool. By the way, I was really worried at first about making this. The expectations for my next work would be really high, so I knew that no matter what I did, I felt like people would be underwhelmed. If you played Undertale, I don't think I can make anything that makes you feel that way again. However, it's possible I can make something else. And it feels clear, based on his own words, that while you can beat the game with a pacifist or aggressive strategy, you can't really say genocide since, yeah, no one is truly dying, it's more because it's a cool gameplay style rather than something that's integral to the story he's looking to tell. So with that out of the way, let's get into the meat of this thing. In that same interview, Toby Fox asked and answered this question. Is this a sequel? What's going on? I'm worried if people worry too much about what it is, they might not be able to enjoy it. I will say that basically what you're seeing here is not the world of Undertale. To rephrase that, Deltarune's world is a different one, with different characters that have lived different lives. A whole new story will happen. With this information out in the world, it got people immediately thinking about alternate universes and some connection to the Gaster experimentation. But I'm not sure that's quite the right angle to go here. You see, Deltarune immediately lays its cards on the table, pun not intended. Okay, so maybe slightly intended. Revealing at the end of chapter 1 that the main plot that we just played through was all an imaginary game. It's Alice in Wonderland. It's Dorothy in Oz. Or in this case, it's Susie and Chris in an abandoned classroom filled with toys. The Darkner world, with the Mad King and his son Lancer, isn't a real place. It's an imaginary game land populated by a deck of cards, and old stuffed cats, puzzle pieces, checkers getting caned. The game hits us over the head with this revelation like a squeaky toy mallet. Oh wait, that's also a character in the Darkner world. But for further proof of the it's all imaginary angle, just look at Chris's weapon descriptions. Chris's wood sword is described as a wooden blade with a carbon reinforced core. But if you check your inventory after returning to your hometown, suddenly you're holding a pencil, wood, with carbon in the middle. The same is true with Chris's spooky sword. If that's what you have equipped when you end your journey and hop into the Dark Fountain, Chris is then left with a Halloween pencil in the real world. For even more proof, Chris's ball of accumulated junk, that is also in his inventory, is largely alluded to be all of the items you collected across your journey. It changes based on what's in your inventory. Attempting to throw it away will make Chris's hands shake, though he doesn't want to give it up. Chris's internal life is clearly rich and vibrant, and he holds strong emotional attachments to it, which is why it's all the more impressive that he makes the decision to let Susie become a part of it. Susie is clearly the class bully, but she's a much deeper character than what that might imply. Throughout Chapter 1, Susie is repeatedly defined by being hungry. Shortly after being introduced, we catch her eating chalk, at which point she lashes out in anger. In the Dark World, she goes on to steal a cake, munch on Lancer's salsa, demand Ralsei bake cakes for her, and raise funds to buy chocolates from the bake sale, which puts her initial reaction to the chalk moment into a new perspective. She's angry because someone just saw how poor she is. That's why she keeps her hair long. That's why her jeans are ripped. And that's why she's so mad all the time. She is actively pushing people away from her because she's ashamed of who she is. Notice that of all the houses you can visit during the Chapter 1 epilogue, hers isn't one of them. I predict because the reveal of her broken home life will be saved for a future chapter. So we have ourselves the quiet, introverted Chris and the misunderstood bully Susie. Once they enter the abandoned classroom looking for chalk, Chris invites Susie into her imaginary world, acting as a dungeon master of sorts, using the items found around the room and in their pockets as items and characters and weapons. And this isn't a spur-of-the-moment adventure either. This classroom and the dark world created within it is a place where Chris has played often. It's a detail that's easy to overlook if you don't explore the rest of the school building, but we learn that Chris's mother, Toriel, is a teacher at the school, making it very possible that Chris would often play here. This was once her safe space, a place of creative freedom and happiness, a place where her and her older brother Asriel would play, at least until he left for college. Enter Ralsei, our third hero of light, and an anagram of the name Asriel. Coincidence? You know it's not. By talking to people around the town, we get a very clear picture of the Dreamer family backstory. At some point early in his life, Chris was adopted into this family, becoming the only human in a town full of monsters. Asriel, who's slightly older, is portrayed as the town's golden boy, singing in the church choir, going to dances with Patty, hitting up chicks with burger pants. The family was happy. From talking to Father Alvin at the church and the waitress at the diner, we can piece together that they used to attend church every Sunday, followed by a breakfast, at least until Toriel and Asgore got a divorce. As the waitress in the diner says, of course, things happened and then y'all stopped coming together. But every Sunday, you and your brother'd still come in. He'd order you a hot chocolate. You must really miss him. And those words more true. In the aftermath of the family's divorce, Asriel protected Chris, served as a loving rock of stability. But then he left too. He went to college, leaving Chris absolutely alone. Remember, Chris has to be adopted, so he's been abandoned by his birth parents, abandoned by his adopted parents, and now he's abandoned by his brother. It's why, when you drink the hot chocolate, your throat gets tight. It brings back painful memories of missing it. If Susie is a bully because she's ashamed of being poor, Chris is brooding and emotionally removed from the world around her because she feels alone and betrayed. He's shut down emotionally for his own protection, and in a figurative and literal sense, he shut the door to that room where he used to play with Asriel, which is why, when it's suddenly in front of him again and he has to enter it for supplies, he's scared. That door is both literally and symbolically an entry into Chris's most private life. And this moment of him backing away is the fear of letting himself become emotionally vulnerable again, and also of letting someone else who can turn him in again. And this isn't just speculation. Look at Ralsei. This is a character that Chris has made up as a stand-in for his brother, right? That much is pretty obvious. What isn't as obvious about this character, though, is why Chris decided to characterize his brother the way he has. Ralsei in the Dark World is young and a bit of a pushover. Chris is the leader of the group down in the Dark World, not the older brother. In fact, as Ralsei himself says, I've been waiting alone here my whole life for you two to arrive. Ralsei has no world, no history without Chris being there. Chris has created an embodiment of his brother who is incapable of leaving him. This is someone who is dependent on Chris. And why is Ralsei so young? Well, it's probably because this is the version of him that Chris wants to remember. The one that played with him in the abandoned classroom. The one that didn't abandon him and his family by going to college. After the events of Chapter 1, there are 6 days before Asriel returns home from college. And at the end of their adventure, Susie eagerly asks to return to the Dark World adventure the following day. To me, this is setting up the chapter arc of this game, with each new chapter being a new day of this imaginary game, all leading up to the climax, the return of Asriel. With the reveal that Asriel is the knight, the big bad of the Darkner world. Not the ideal Asriel that Chris has embodied in Ralsei, but the older, real-world Asriel coming home from college, one that runs the risk of shattering the Darkner world once and for all. Look at what we've established so far. Chris uses this game to work through her abandonment issues, especially as they regard her brother in the form of Ralsei. The biggest upheaval for her would be that the brother who returns home from college isn't the same as when he left. The fear that he is now a different person. Now look at what we know about the Knight. We're told that the Darkner world was at peace until the Knight came and corrupted the King of Spades, that he can create dark fountains, and that he's responsible for Jevil, the secret jester boss's, fall to insanity, and eventually him being locked up. This all lines up with Asriel's role in Chris's life. In Ralsei's prophecy, he states that the Fountains of Darkness give this land form, and in a hidden, unused manual buried in the game's files, it confirms that the Dark Fountains give rise to Ralsei's body. In other words, they are the things that make this imaginary world made of real-life toys come to life, meaning that they have to be tied to either Chris or Asriel, the creators of this world, the storytellers. Now look at Jevil. All his dialogue speaks to how those outside of his prison cell are the ones who are locked up, and that he is the one who's free. He admits, however, that he's lonely, and that he wishes more people to be free with him. Shalm explains that Jevil, quote, started saying bizarre things that didn't completely make sense, but didn't completely not make sense either. Eventually, Jevil started viewing the world as a game, while everyone acting in it is its participants, which we know is actually true here. So Jevil is, in my estimation, the embodiment of Chris's imagination, her childhood spirit. I mean, think about it. The Darkners are toys who have literally been locked away when no one wanted to play with them anymore. And Jevil is literally and figuratively being kept separate from them because Chris no longer has that childish spirit to want to play with them. If Jevil is Chris's childish spirit or imagination, then he would be free. He is the spirit of chaos and freedom and creativity and everything that childhood imagination means. And of course, he's lonely since he's been shut to the side with no one to play with him ever since Asriel left. Until the day that Susie decided to join the game, and the door was unlocked. Even his insistence on playing a numbers game directly parallels his knowledge that this whole adventure is just a Dungeons and Dragons-esque imaginary adventure. And what was the thing that killed Chris's playful spirit in the beginning? The final thing that broke her? Asriel leaving. It killed all the joy she had, leaving her alone. She no longer wants to play, meaning that Jevil, in turn, is locked away, kept separate from all the theories of the Darkness world. But lastly, look at the Lightner prophecy. Wolsey tells us at the beginning of the game that the Lightners must destroy something called the Angel's Heaven. What? Destroying heaven made by angels? Usually those are seen as good things. It seems like it would be the opposite of what you want to do until you stop and think, where else have we seen an angel in this series before? Asriel's final form in Undertale. In fact, the idea of Angel's Heaven might just be the thing that unlocks the connections between Undertale and Deltarune. Are they indeed two separate universes created by Gaster, as many believe, or are the connections something more, something deeper? More on that, the Undertale-Deltarune connection, next time, since that is a whole other theory unto itself. So make sure you subscribe to see it. In fact, I challenge you to hit that subscribe bell and comment below which Deltarune character is your favorite in the next 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, haha. You. Quick reminder, Game Theory merch is still available. Order it now and you'll get it in plenty of time for the holidays. It is the softest and warmest collection of hoodies, pajama pants, and hats that you could ask for. Link is going to appear on screen right now. Make sure you click it before they're gone. Stuff is quickly selling out. I want to make sure that we're not crushing anyone's holiday hoodie dreams. And finally, most importantly of all, remember, it's all just a theory. Again, theory. Thanks for watching.
Why does Special K have 10 grams of protein? Yep, that's why. Special K. Special for a reason. The Pope is dead. We're about to choose the most famous man in the world. No same man would want the papacy. The men who are dangerous are the ones who do want it. Play rated PG. Only in theaters October 25th.
You know the great thing about multi-part theories? They actually give me one of the rare opportunities I have to answer some of your biggest questions about earlier parts of the theory, which is pretty exciting actually. So last time we talked about how the mysterious Darkner world that Chris and Susie explore during the most inefficient quest to find chalk ever is all just an imaginary role-playing game, one dreamed up by Chris in an attempt to connect with Susie and work through their personal struggles. You can tell based on the fact that the Darkners are toys, the weapons are school supplies, and the story incorporates people from Chris's life. But that, of course, led to a lot of questions and counterpoints. So before we move forward with part 2 of this mega theory, let me address some of those. Question 1. If everything was just a game, then what about Susie? How would she go along with Chris's game? And then how would Slayer reaction, asking whether everything was just a dream when they leave the classroom? How could something imaginary have this level of emotional impact on her? Well, the thing to remember here is that she doesn't just go for it at the beginning of the story. Notice how she starts, metaphorically running away from Chris, ignoring Halsey's prophecy, saying things like, let's just get this over with. She is clearly not into the fantasy elements of the story, and she's only won over once the fighting starts. She likes fighting so much that you can't even control her. She just attacks everything. She's playing a game where Chris is giving her the choice to act out her violent fantasies in a safe environment with no consequences. In the paper role-playing world, these types of characters even have a name. They're called the murder hobos. The new or reluctant players who simply murder everything that they can find until they realize that, heck, they can solve problems presented to them in a number of different ways. Remember, you don't have to take everything everything literally. A dark, scary closet can be symbolic of emotional vulnerability. And at the end of the chapter, her response is the response of someone coming out of a fantasy world. Someone who was super immersed in the game that they were playing. Haven't you ever felt that way after playing a video game? Not knowing how much time has passed, you let yourself get lost in the story. You're immersed, and when you come out, you're a changed person. I used the comparison last time to The Wizard of Oz. It doesn't actually matter whether or not Dorothy literally went to Oz. She wakes up a changed person. She looks at her friends and family in a different way, just like Susie coming out of this imaginary game. Question 2, isn't the theory that says everything is just a game simply a lazy explanation on par with dream theories? Yes. Yes, it is, 100%. If there isn't any proof that that's the case, and also if there isn't any narrative consequences to that theory. But here, we have both of those things. We have enemies that are checkers with legs. We traverse checkerboards alongside playing cards and stuffed cats. With characters use pencils as weapons and random junk in their pockets as items. And it's all to tell this story about a socially outcast kid who is working through their emotions via an imaginary game world. It seems pretty solid to me, but as more pieces of evidence, notice everyone's fainting animations during the battle. Chris and Susie both take a knee while they recover. Halsey, however, the only Darkner in the party, completely disappears, leaving only his hat and cape. He's not real, while the other two are. Oh, and that whole opening sequence in the purple barren area, it's just Chris's imagination getting warmed up again to tell the story. She starts with what's immediately in her mind. Chalk. It's what Alphys tells her to go get, it's what she sees Susie eats, and it's what she starts her story with. Notice all those white piles at the beginning? Chalk does. And look at that first save point. It already has Chris's name in there. This is a place that she's been to before, and she reaches out, quote, like it's second nature. This is a home away from home for Chris. We're told early on that only eyes blinded by darkness can see the way. That tells us everything we need to know. We're not seeing with our eyes, we're seeing with our imagination. Question 3, is Theoryware still available? And yes, it is, thanks for asking. It ships internationally, and it comes in all sizes, and it is really high quality with all the patches and designs sewn into the fabric. And it has been shown in the past to unite fellow theorists out in the wild. And yes, if you do order before December 10th, you are guaranteed to get it before Christmas, regardless of whether you're international or not. So, yeah. Thanks for asking. And finally, question number 4. What about the egg in the fridge? What about the ending where Chris rips their heart out? What about the Gaster connections? How does all of this connect to Undertale? Well, how much time you got? Because that is where the theory for today.
The $5 meal deal at McDonald's means you get to pick between McDonald's or McChicken. Then get a small fry, a small drink, and a 4-piece McNuggets. That's a lot of McDonald's, but not a lot of me. Get the $5 meal deal today. Prices and participation may vary for a limited time.
Yes. Welcome to Game Theoryware. I gotta say, that was by far the longest intro to an episode ever. I kinda liked it though, being able to answer questions in follow-up format. I wish there was a way that we could do it more regularly without YouTube actively punishing the channel for an upload that's gonna get fewer clicks. Anyway, let's cut to the chase. Today we're starting to examine the one all-important question looming over all of Delta. How exactly is it connected to Undertale? On one hand, you have characters out on the surface, which seems to indicate it's happening after the events of Undertale, but then again, you have details like Undyne having both her eyes, meaning that this must have come before. So it can't be a sequel to Undertale, but it also can't be a prequel, not in the traditional sense at least. So what is Deltarune Undertale if it is truly anything? Well, with all those options discounted, there seems to be just one possibility, that this is a parallel world. a more peaceful one, where the monsters were never driven underground by the humans, where Undyne never lost an eye, where Bratty and Catty never became friends, where the Dreamers never adopted a fallen child because there was nowhere for the child to fall into. To anyone who's played Undertale, the idea of an alternate universe doesn't sound that far-fetched. I mean, after all, the central premise of Undertale's entire story is that every time you, as the player, reload a save file or start a new game, you're creating a new timeline of events. In one reality, everyone is freed from the underground to live happily ever after. In another, Uriel is left to rule the underground after Asgore's tragic death. And in yet another, everyone dies and the world is destroyed. And no matter how many times you reset, no matter how long it's been since you last played the game, you can't get away from the consequences of your decision. Or in my personal canon universe, all the boss monsters die, leaving only the annoying dog to rule the underground with his fluffy little iron paw fist. Every one of these parallel timelines exists in Undertale's universe. And from story elements right down to the game's mechanics, there is a significant amount of evidence to suggest that the light-year world of Deltarune, everything that's happening at the beginning and epilogue of Chapter 1, is yet another iteration of the main Undertale universe. First, look at this. Deltarune has its own unique menu system, but only when you're exploring and fighting in the darkness. When Chris is running around Luna, the pause menu and inventory screens are totally different, but just so happen to be totally identical to the menus that we saw in Undertale. That could just be chalked up to a minor design coincidence until you also notice this, the text boxes. All the boxes that we see in Hometown use the traditional Undertale UI, with entirely black and white sprites talking. All the inhabitants in the Dark World, meanwhile, are represented by colored sprites. Coincidence? Maybe, until you also notice that Susie, the only other person from your world, has a black and white portrait even when she's down in the dark.
I do something.
Clearly using the elements of game design to draw a connection between the overworld and the events of Undertale. We already know that the game mechanics of Undertale form the very fabric of its reality. As we see Flowey actively exploit the saving and loading systems during his final playthrough. And we know that those mechanical factors remain constant, even as you jump between the different timelines. So the fact that Deltarune's Hometown also has those same mechanics heavily implies that it exists in yet another version of that very same reality. Only this time it's a reality with one key difference. The war between humans and monsters never...
There's a rhythm in the markets, the resonant echoes of the opening bell, and the preludes greeting the local elections, and the rising voice conducted by AI. And if you want to learn to listen more, we'll show you how. Learn more at Bluebird.com.
Actually, the most obvious difference becomes apparent right at the start of the game. The fact that Asriel Dreamer, the not so imaginatively named son of Asgore and Toriel, can't believe it took me this long to finally put that one together, is still alive. Now, as a refresher, before the events of Undertale, Asriel was tragically killed by humans after escaping the barrier to the underground with his adopted sibling Chara. His death was the inciting incident for Undertale's entire story, giving rise to every major conflict present in the game. But in Deltarune, that never happened. He's still alive and he's off enjoying college life. Another change that really stands out is the difference in Alfie's and Undyne's relationship. Their romance plays a key role in Undertale's true pacifist ending, but in Deltarune, they don't even know each other. Remember those differences because we'll come back to them in a moment. Before we do that, though, let's look at some examples of what doesn't change between the games. First, back in Undertale, our favorite high-strung register jockey made it very clear that he hated the underground, and that he longed to be on the surface where he would get a second chance at life and fulfill his dream of becoming an actor. So, I wanted to be an actor! If Asgore gets just one more soul, we'll finally get to go to the surface! It'll be a brand new world! There's gotta be a second chance out there for me! In Deltarune, we see him on the surface with a new chance at life. Where is he? He still ends up working a minimum wage job at a restaurant where he talks about eventually becoming an actor. I can't slag off the seconds without hearing. Yes, he tried. There's no hide. Yes, there is. Let's check it out. But it's okay to invite. No. As he is. Hey. And I'll get a theater degree, become a famous actor. Let the bad girls roll in, and like then, there's the rest of the Dreamer family. Despite living very different lives in Deltarune that they did in Undertale, Asgore still loves flowers, Toriel still loves kids, she still makes butterscotch and coffee, they still adopt a child, and they still wind up...
What do you mean slowness?
Now, come on over to the cemetery, and you can Finds gravestones. There's Person Eternal, and there are 3 other characters that you immediately recognize. So I started asking myself what united a snowy gemstone mother, a leader of a pack of dogs, and a brave karaoke singer. Then it hit me. They were all the amalgamates and twisted monsters that had died of natural causes and then had been experimented on with determination in the true lab of Undertale. Snowdrake's mother and Dodge the pack of dogs and Lemon Bread, Shira's sister, the singer, all dead in this timeline, just like they were in the Undertale timeline. Only this time they got all melted together. So why am I getting all this out? Well, at first glance, these similarities and differences in these two games' worlds might seem random, but there does appear to be a consistent logic behind them. The things that stay consistent between Undertale and Delta are the results of the characters' personalities, while the differences appear to be the direct result of the monster-human war having never occurred. Burger Pants ends up working at yet another restaurant because that's the kind of job he's suited for. As an actor means to be working fast food for a while. Toriel and Asgore adopt a human child in both games because they're simply loving parents, and they eventually get divorced in both games because they simply aren't romantically compatible in any timeline. Their divorce was inevitable, and it had to do with them, their personalities, and not external events. The monsters who became amalgamates in Undertale all died of natural causes, which would have happened whether they were in the underground or not. But now look at all those differences I mentioned. The monsters are on the surface because the war never happened. Asriel is alive because his adopted sibling did die and asked to be brought to the surface, which was a direct result of the war. Officer Undyne never lost her eye because she wasn't a soldier. Never needed to be because soldiers just aren't a thing in a warless world. In Undertale's world, she and Elsies met because she was at the dump looking for cool swords, and as a cop, she just would never need to do that. Undertale's world was built around a repressed society in the aftermath of a bloody war against the humans, but in this alternate timeline, a world that branched off before that war ever occurred, the same personalities are left to find new paths. The strong-willed Undyne will still become an authority figure in her community, but instead of being a soldier, she becomes a cop. Just like Burger Pants will always be a struggling actor working the register, living out the same story, just in a different timeline branch. But back in Undertale, there were some characters like Sans, Flowey, and of course you, who were able to travel between the separate universes and knew the alternate histories that were unfolding, something that seems to be continuing in Deltarune. Travel north of the intersection where you meet Undyne, and you'll find your second favorite skeleton standing in front of a grocery store that is clearly Ruby's with Snowman and Sans' name painted over the side. Next door is Sans and Iris's house, also rich straight from Undertale. This is already pretty interesting on its own. Aside from Nazgul Luke's house further north, these are the only other 2 buildings in Hometown that are identical to the buildings from Undertale. It's almost as if Sans took his 2 favorite places from Snowden with him when he came to this world. But that could just be a coincidence, right? Maybe, but what's a lot harder to wave off here is Sans' dialogue. When you speak to him, you have 2 options for greeting him. Great to see you again, and who the heck are you? If you choose the latter one, nothing of note happened. But if you choose the former, Sans says, yeah, it's real nice, isn't it? Especially considering I've never met you before. It's a line that seems to imply that this is indeed a new Sans in a new world, in a brand new game, but notice that he delivers the line with a smile and a wink. The exact same response he gives in Undertale every single time he's pretending that he doesn't know about the other timelines. So Sans seems to know what's going on, but that's expected at this point. Sans is an extra-worldly character who seems to be a master of time and space. It doesn't, however, explain how Chris knows him. It makes 0 sense for Chris to say, great to meet you again, to someone that they've never met before. But it does make sense for the player to say that. Consider this. During Chapter 1's epilogue, while Chris is wandering around Hometown, several characters remark that they're acting differently than they normally do. That Chris is more cheerful and outgoing. And you could chalk that up to having a good day and making a new friend in Susie, but it seems to go deeper. The nurse at the hospital tells us that Chris's beautiful piano playing often cheers her and the patients up. But when the player moves Chris to the piano and tries to play it, all they can do is play a single, horrid, sour note. Having a good day would make Chris suddenly lose all their musical skills. The difference is the player's influence. Chris and the player are not one and the same. It's actually something that's established in the Dota game. A mysterious voice calls out, are you there? Are we connected? Then, only then, the soul We are there. We are the only thing that's there. We are connected to this new game. We are the soul that the game has been waiting for to connect to and thus move on. The soul is us. It's why when you speak to Undyne, you can bring up Alphys, or your past relationships with Sans, or why when Chris rips their heart out at the end of Chapter 1 and throws it into the cage, the player is still able to move the heart around, if only by a few pixels. This implies that the character Chris and the player us are two separate entities. It's not just a last-minute jump scare with Chris pulling their best Chara impression. It's Chris actively rejecting the player's control over them and their story. Hence the evil look at the camera. The fourth wall is breaking in an Undertale game once again. It's Chris saying the character you want me to be is not the character I want to be. The decisions you want me to make are not the ones I'm going to make. Your choices, player, don't matter. So what we're left with is a universe that's separate to Undertale, but clearly related, and characters, including ourselves, who know that these bridges between worlds exist. So then, who's the one pulling the strings? Who is the voice speaking to us at the beginning of the game, looking to connect to us? And why? Why would they do that? And most importantly of all, what does any of this have to do with the plot of Deltarune? Well, the answer is that it's Gaster, who may just be Toby Fox. But all of that in the finale of our trilogy of Deltarune episodes next week. Don't freak out, there's going to be a decoding the story mode of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate that'll happen just a few days before it. Because, boy howdy, that game needs some explaining. Anyway, don't worry, Deltarune is coming and it's going to come out within the week. These episodes just take a lot longer to edit, so I'm able to talk about it a bit more in advance. So make sure you ring that bell to get notified, and in the meantime, you might want to brush up on your Gaster lore, so here's a link to my previous theories on him before part 3. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a date to get my hair dyed green and red. Thank you all donating on the charity live stream. Thank you so much for that, by the way. You're so wonderful. And in the meantime, remember, that's just a theory. Again, theory. Thanks for watching. Can you imagine a world where we're all represented by a font? Huh, wonder which one I would be. Too straight. No, not in that way, just straight, as in unexciting. Too,
What?
Deadpool. Broadway! Now that's the one! Now that's the one! Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, where, instead of putting a joke here, I want to ask you a question. If your personality were represented by a font, what font would you be? Take a moment and put your font in the comments. I'm really curious to see what everyone has to say. Maybe find a couple new cool fonts to use. Get bored with old Calibri 11. And with that out of the way, it's time to talk Undertale. Now, I don't think I've ever gotten this many requests to cover a game. Well, except for FNAF. And I suppose FNAF 2. Oh, and then there was FNAF 3. Wait a minute, should I be worried about something here? Anyway, across the board on YouTube, Reddit, and Twitter, you all have wanted Undertale. And honestly, I'm glad you brought it to my attention. True loyal theorists will know that Earthbound is my favorite game of all time. So a self-aware RPG in a similar style? Oh man, it's like a gift from the indie gaming heavens. Undertale is a game where every character, from Goat Mom to Grind Fodder, has a sympathetic design and unique personality, motivations, goals, and fears. Whether you're saving or slaughtering them, the game makes you feel something every time you enter an encounter. But to me, one character stood out amongst all the rest. Sans. A skeleton named after the font Comic Sans, hence all the font references at the beginning of the episode. If you haven't played Undertale, I'm sure that was a really weird opening. Anyway, Sans is... well, there's a lot of mystery around this guy, and before we get into it, I put up a very special spoiler warning. Undertale is a game best experienced live, so if you haven't played it, pause the video